Hey there. Welcome to another episode of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and this is Casey. Now, she hasn't joined me for a little while, so I thought I'd bring her down. So this episode, I just want to talk about the new toys that I got since my last video. So I'll keep this intro brief because I got a few new toys, and I don't want this episode to go too long. But yeah, the first couple that I'll show you here are some Transformers that I got on a recent little road trip. My wife's parents, my in-laws, I guess, still got to get used to that. My in-laws are moving. They currently live about 5 hours away on the island of Cape Breton off of Nova Scotia here. So, and they're moving actually right into my neighborhood. So this past weekend, we drove up to Cape Breton to help them pack up and then bring a truckload back down this way. So anyway, the 5 hour drive was actually pretty convenient for me because I was just the passenger. Vanessa did the driving, and I had done my last episode was an interview with Bobby Valla about his upcoming toy line Action Force, which I hope you've watched that episode. But if you haven't, I would encourage you to because it's an episode I'm proud of. It's my first episode with a guest. And I think the Action Force toy line looks like it's going to be pretty exciting. So please check that out. So yeah, I recorded my video with Bobby a night or two before that. And I was excited to get it up and post it. So I thought I could do some editing on that video on my way up. And I just had a ton of problems. The audio was all out of sync. And there was spots where the audio was like doubled up. And I was having a lot of trouble fixing it. And I actually posted the video just before we left for the trip. And then a friend of mine said he watched my video and the audio was really bad. And so, yeah, I was kind of embarrassingly had to pull that down. So hopefully, if by any chance one of you watched the video and noticed there was bad audio, please know that it's been fixed and now you can go back and watch it. So, yeah, driving up there, I was getting really frustrated. And Vanessa could see it on my face. And sweetheart that she is, she suggested we pull into this Walmart, which was probably about 3 hours away from my house, so not one that I visit on the regular. And I kind of begrudgingly, said, okay, but I'd rather just keep driving. And she's like, no, let's pull over and see if we can find you something to cheer you up. And sure enough, I found some Transformers. And she even treated me to one of them. So, yeah, so that was pretty nice. So first up, I'll show you those Transformers that I got on my road trip. And then I will show you a couple additional figures that I picked up in the week since. So here we go. So here's the first figure that I picked up at the Walmart in Cape Breton. So this is Ironhide from the Transformers Siege toy line. And this is one of the figures I was looking for and hoping to find. Because this wave 2 of these Siege figures had just recently started hitting my local Walmarts. And I'd seen the rest of Wave 2, like Prowl and whatnot, but hadn't seen Ironhide yet. So yeah, I was figuring there was a good chance I would find him, and I did. So let's open him up and take a look. So this here is Siege Ironhide. And I think he is pretty cool. Now, Ironhide is one of the oldest Transformers. He came out in the very first wave back in the 80s. And he was heavily featured in the cartoon and the comic books back in the day. So yeah, he's one of the main guys. And he was always kind of the older, crankier Transformer. Now, I didn't have the vintage toy when I was young. My brother Doug did. And it was probably the worst Transformer toy from the vintage line. Because it was a bad figure, but besides that, Ironhide was a beloved character who was featured so prominently in the media that you knew him very well, and so you wanted a figure that looked like Ironhide. But where the early Transformer toys were kind of just a mishmash of other Japanese toy lines, so they didn't always look like the media that was kind of created in America to tie it all together. But some of the figures, that's why they were so drastic in size difference, and you had some guys that turned into guns and some guys that turned into trucks. It's because in Japan those were all from different toy lines and they weren't related to each other. And the original Ironhide came from a toy line that didn't even have like living sentient robots. It was from just a bunch of transforming vehicles that were controlled by man. So the original Ironhide figure did not have a head. It basically stopped there. That was kind of the figure. And inside the windshield there was a little seat where a pilot was intended to drive it. And I remember there was like a sticker that came with it that kind of looked like a face, but not even a very good face. And you could stick that face on the sticker, and that kind of, I guess, was supposed to pass as Ironhide's head. But this is basically what Ironhide looked like in the cartoon. And if you bought this figure and it just came like that, you would be disappointed. And we were. That was a very bad toy. So, yeah, Ironhide didn't get any good toys until much later. Now, I really started collecting Transformers as an adult around the mid-2000s when they started with their Generations line and their Classics line. And I wasn't happy with the Ironhide they put out. I remember he had like kind of a baby blue face, and he just looked Ironhide should feel big and thick, and I remember he looked like he had a lot of hollow spots on him. I wasn't a fan of it, and I actually thought that was the Ironhide I had in my collection. So when I knew this Siege version was coming out, I was very happy to replace that crappy one. To my surprise, when I went to haul out my Ironhide for this video, I remembered, oh yeah, I didn't buy that one because I didn't like it very much. The Ironhide that I have in my collection that's been kind of standing in as my default Ironhide is actually this version. And I haven't had him all that long because this is from the Combiner Wars toy line from just a couple of years ago. And you can see it's Ironhide, and the fact that his face kind of has that ridge through the middle, which is pretty standard for Ironhide. And he's got the right red colors, but he doesn't really look like Ironhide beyond that. You see this piece here in his chest, that flips out, and this helps him combine so he can become an arm and a leg for part of a combiner, which all the robots in the Combiner Wars toy line had. So you kind of had to sacrifice some of their unique looks in order to accommodate that feature. And this body was originally used for another figure. It was a Decepticon called Off-Road, and so they basically just changed the color, gave him a new head, and called him Ironhide. And I honestly don't think this is a bad figure, because I thought Off-Road was a decent figure, but it's not the best Ironhide. It just doesn't really look like the Ironhide I grew up with. This one, on the other hand, looks much closer. He doesn't transform into a minivan like he's supposed to, but since I never transform my Transformer toys anyway, that doesn't really matter to me. And this Siege storyline is supposed to take place on Cybertron before any of the Autobots came to Earth and took on Earth vehicle modes. So it makes sense that he transformed into kind of this weird space truck instead of a minivan. But he still has the iconic Ironhide face, and that big windshield across his chest is kind of the other main thing that you'd expect to see Ironhide figure. And he's got that. So yeah, I'm very happy to make this the signature Ironhide in my collection, and this guy can be booted out. So yeah, last thing I want to mention about this guy is the weapon he comes with. So he's got this big cannon, missile launcher, maybe grenade launcher. Anyway, very cool weapon. Ironhide is supposed to be kind of the Autobots weapons guy, or heavy ordnance or whatever. So it makes sense that he would come with such a big badass gun. So yeah, I really dig this this Ironhide figure. He's got some of that weathering effect that we've been seeing on these Siege figures, but not much. So yeah, it's a pretty clean paint job, nice sculpt, and yeah, I dig it. That's Ironhide. And the next new Transformer I get, Vanessa actually picked this one up for me. So this is a reproduction of the vintage Hot Rod figure from the 80s. So he's got that retro style packaging, kind of the retro artwork and everything, and these old kind of, I don't know, file cards for lack of a better word, little bio sheet. And these things here that used to be on all the old vintage packaging, which told you the character's strength and intelligence and all that stuff. Love that artwork. Anyway, so this is pretty cool. And this is the kind of thing I would be tempted to keep in the package. Just because it does have... Like, the packaging is really part of the appeal of this thing here. Now, this thing has a couple of problems. For one, I like my Transformers as robots. I don't really care that much about vehicle modes. And Hot Rod here is in vehicle mode. So if I were to just pin this to the wall as is, you're not really getting to see Hot Rod. You're just getting to see the car. And that's the other problem, is you don't even really get to see the car. I don't know if this is exactly what the vintage product was like, but even if it was, they probably shouldn't have been so slavish to the original design, because this is ridiculous. If this is supposed to appeal to a kid when they walk past it on the shelf, you've got these 2 silver pistols basically being the main feature of the packaging, and then this cool sports car with the flames on the hood you can't even see. It's hidden behind the artwork there, which is completely ridiculous. So that's why I'm going to open this guy up. So let's do that now. See, look at that. Was that so hard to do? Now you can see the car. That's much more appealing, and I'm much more likely to pin that up on my shelf like that. And if I was a kid in a toy store, I'd be much more inclined to ask my mom to buy me this figure than that just yellow piece of plastic and a couple of silver guns, which is all I could see the way Hasbro packaged this thing. So yeah, much, much better. Now let's get this guy out of the package altogether. Alright, so this is Hot Rod in car mode. And it looks pretty cool. Looks like how I remember the vintage toy looking. And yeah, this is a rarity in one of my videos that you actually get to see the Transformer in their vehicle mode, because I very rarely bother to transform them into their vehicle modes. And once I transform this guy into his robot mode, I will probably never transform him back into this car mode. So there you go. Drink it in. So this here is vintage Hot Rod. And yeah, he was simpler to transform than I remember. It only took a couple of quick flips. The instruction sheet, let's see here. It's there's 3 steps there, and another 3 steps there. So like 6 quick flips. Some of those were just something as simple as saying put his guns in his hands. So much less complicated than the instructions. Like, here's the instruction book that came with that Ironhide that I just showed you, and he's got, so there's at least 14 steps with Ironhide, and even he doesn't seem like a very complicated transformer. So yeah, they've definitely gotten more complicated since the 80s. Yeah, and so he looks pretty cool, but he definitely looks 80s. Now he's lacking some of his flair because I didn't put on any of his decals that he came with yet. So like these ones here will go on his shins, and this piece here will go on his like crotch piece. So yeah, he'll look a little more dynamic once I've got all his stickers on. But yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's kind of fun to get a new version of such an old toy. And yeah, so let's just compare them to one of the newer versions of Hot Rod. So this here is like the classics or generations version of Hot Rod that came out, and sometime in the last couple of years. And yeah, this guy's a little bit more dynamic looking, kind of less creepy. Like this is face sculpt wise. I don't know, there's something about this guy where he looks kind of creepy. But yeah, this guy here is a little more fidgety. He's not the easiest thing to play with. They've made lots of versions of Hot Rod since. Actually, at the same store where I bought this guy, they had the newest version of Hot Rod in his Prime mode. So if you weren't already aware, Hot Rod here, who's a young hotshot Autobot who was introduced in the animated Transformers movie in '87. That's the movie where Optimus Prime was killed, and Hot Rod ended up taking the matrix of leadership and transforming into Rodimus Prime. So yeah, there's a figure of Rodimus Prime that just came out like last year, and he was marked down at Walmart the other day, and I thought about buying him, but he's just so big. Like scale wise, he's probably about, this much taller. I don't know. Talking like, probably like 15 inches or something. At least 12. And it feels too at a scale with the rest of my Transformers collection. I don't want my Hot Rod to be 12 plus inches. So this is a more appropriate scale for Hot Rod at 6 inches. But this isn't the greatest figure. This guy here is fun just for his vintageness. But I wouldn't replace this guy in my collection as this being my default Rodimus either. This is just kind of a fun little throwback, which I'll keep on the shelf with the rest of my Transformers. I'm glad I got him. He's definitely worth $20. And yeah, there you go. Hot Rod. And the last figure I picked up at the Cape Breton Walmart was Dragonstorm from the live-action Transformers The Last Knight. Now, normally, I don't even look at these figures. I'm not a fan of the live-action movies. First one, was alright. But after that, I pretty much thought they were all garbage. And I think they've actually gotten progressively worse. They all kind of blur together to me now. But, maybe the second one was okay, and the third one was tolerable. But like the fourth and fifth, they're unwatchable. And so this guy, Last Night, I believe, is the fifth and final movie. And I thought it was garbage. So any of these Michael Bay-inspired Transformers that are, commonly referred to as Bayformers, I have no interest in. But I saw this thing here on an end cap, and it was for sale. As you can see there, it was $20 off. And it was the same sale end cap where I found the vintage Hot Rod. So when I was looking at Hot Rod, I was kind of glanced at this thing. And Vanessa was like, well, why don't you buy that? It's on sale. And I'm like, I'm not buying some Bayformer. And she just looked at me and said, well, it's a dragon. It's a 3-headed dragon. And I was like, well, fair enough. And I am a big fan of monsters, dragons, Dinobots, Godzilla, all that stuff. So if I can just get past the fact that this is a Michael Bay, designed creature, it is still a 3-headed dragon that turns into not just one robot, but actually 2 robots. So that's kind of cool. So I figured, what the hell? I'll treat myself. So I bought this guy, and let's check him out of the package and see if he was worth my $50. So here is Dragonstorm out of his packaging. And, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with his tail here. That looks kind of weird. And he doesn't seem to have a good stance. Like, his front legs are pretty short. So you can't really pose him in a way to get him really up there. Like, he feels like a wonky piece of shit, which is what I was worried about. Like, these back legs don't seem to really secure into place. The heads are kind of a weird, like, soft rubber, like you can squish them. It feels kind of odd. And then at least the jaw's open. It's kind of cool. It's kind of even hard to make out the details on these heads. But yeah, he's very awkward. You can see his wings go up there. This is kind of what we're looking at on the side. Yeah, so far I'm not impressed with Dragon Mode. Maybe a couple things need to be snapped together. I just took him out of the box. But he feels very, very kind of wonky. So I'm hoping that once I transform him into the 2 robots, that he'll be a little more stable and a little cooler than this, because even just the detail on it, like, it's hard to know if he's supposed to be a robot dragon. His skin looks like it's more supposed to be like scaly skin, like you would see in the Beast Wars or something, where he's not supposed to look like a robotic dragon, but an actual, like, real silver dragon. And I don't really like that look. I'd rather he looked more mechanical, like a Dinobot. So, yeah. Okay, so this is Dragonstorm broken up into his 2 robot modes. So this here is Dragonicus, And this is Storm Rain. They're not bad. I think they're definitely better than the Beast Mode, which is unfortunate because I bought this toy because of the Beast Mode. It was the three-headed dragon that kind of roped me in, but based on how wonky the Beast Mode was, I won't be displaying him that way. So I really kind of needed these robots to be cool. And I think Dragonicus here, or however you say his name, he is pretty cool. Like, he's got the medieval knight look, which I think is appropriate. I barely remember the movie The Last Knight, but I think it kind of, delved into some medievalness, and there were Transformers during medieval times or something like that. So that makes sense for him. He's a knight, but he's clearly a Transformer. He's got some swords. The wings are pretty cool. I dig him. I got no problem adding this guy to my collection. This dude, he's a little underwhelming. Similarly, he looks like a knight. Like, that kind of makes sense for him. He's got a mace as a weapon. The colors match his buddy there, so that's alright. At least they look like a cohesive team. But, like, from the back here, he just kind of looks like he's got stuff thrown on. Like, his legs are very hollow looking. One of them has got the tail kind of hidden away in there. The other one has nothing. This big empty shell on the back, which just looks stupid and serves no purpose. Like, it would have made more sense if that could be flipped around and kind of used to close off the back of him. So we have like kind of this scaly texture here on his back instead of just this big open shell. So yeah, the whole toy just feels kind of cheap. I think I broke him in 2 places, just fidgeting with him, trying to transform him. One of the dragon heads here, I think, was broken right out of the box. Well, not so much the head, but there's like a little peg that attaches to it, and it was snapped off. So I was still able to kind of rest this head in place, but it doesn't stay on very well. Like, you'll see the other 2 dragon heads, they do remain on the figures, again, kind of awkwardly just on the back of his forearm. This guy's got one kind of just awkwardly on the back of his forearm as well. And this guy was supposed to have a dragon on each forearm, but once you start flipping the heads around and stuff, that little peg that seems to have snapped doesn't hold the head on very well. So I'll just have to set this extra head aside, I guess, and try not to lose it. So there you go. Were these guys worth $50? Probably not. But what the hell, I guess. And another new figure that I got this week is Silver Sable from Marvel Legends, part of the Spider-Man wave, which was a Build-A-Figure Kingpin wave. So if you collected all the figures, you could build Kingpin, and Silver Sable was the last figure I needed from that set. So now I have a complete Kingpin once I snap that arm onto him there. And Silver Sable is a character that I'm a big fan of, so I'm excited about this figure. So let's pop her open and take a look at her out of the package. So this here is Silver Sable out of the packaging. So let's get a closer look at her here. I like the face sculpt. It looks pretty sassy. She looks like she means business. But otherwise, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of this figure. Like, I'm not sure. I'm sure this body here, because it's such a standard female body, it's probably been used multiple times. And I just don't think it works great for Silver Sable. It seems a little skinny with that head sculpt. Like, her frame just looks a little too, I don't know, meek and mild or something. Like, she's supposed to be a real badass. Here's another thing I don't like is, and I've seen these on some figures before, like Cyclops has an issue, sometimes cuffs on gloves and cuffs on boots. They make it a separate piece, which part of the reason is because they're using these standard legs, which probably were used on multiple female superheroes, and they didn't have any accessories on them. So rather than sculpt a whole new piece with like a holster attached to it, they just kind of add this extra piece of plastic. But I would much prefer a sculpted piece, because these things, tend to slide off, and they're kind of loose and they look kind of stupid. Another thing I don't like is this arm here. I'm sure this is just a one-off, but I've been trying to bend the elbow, and I think I've almost broke the arm off. This arm will just not bend, and now the peg is really loose, so I think I've really kind of hurt the plastic there. I'm not having the same issue on this arm, but yeah, that's always a bit of a concern when a figure almost breaks right out of the packaging. And accessories-wise, I'm not sure where these guns have come from, but I'm sure I've seen them before. Not that Silver Sable really needs, unique guns, so those are fine as accessories. So yeah, overall it's a decent figure, but definitely not the strongest of the wave, and I still wouldn't consider this to be like the perfect Silver Sable figure. With a lot of these recent Marvel Legends figures, I would say they are pretty much the perfect versions of some of these characters. And with Silver Sable, I think they could do better if they took another shot at her. Now, if you're not familiar with Silver Sable, she is a character that has been around for quite some time. This here is her first appearance back in Amazing Spider-Man 265, which was published in, let me see here, 1985. And she didn't even make the cover, which kind of sucks, because if you have a character's first appearance and you want to put it on your wall or something, you would kind of hope they would be prominently featured on the cover. But she is not. This here is the first real image you see of Silver Sable when she's doing training exercises with her team, the Wild Pack here. So yeah, she was a kind of a guest star in Spider-Man for a long time, before she did eventually get her own book in the 90s, which we have here. You see here it's got kind of this cool silver chrome on her outfit and on the title, even in the corner box there. This was a pretty common thing to do in the 90s, was to have these gimmick covers. But yeah, I really liked Silver Sable as a character, and I really liked her book. I have the full run of her series, and so yeah, I was excited to get a figure of her. Now, I think there's only been one figure of her in the past, and that was the Toy Biz one from the animated Spider-Man line. And this is her here. Now, she had a problem of her own, in that her feet are separate pieces and they fall out really, really easily. But yeah, this was a pretty decent figure at the time. And one advantage this figure has over that one is that they actually used chrome silver for her outfit, which is how I always imagined her outfit was supposed to look. Especially the fact that they chromed it on the cover of that comic book there really indicated that, yeah, she was wearing a reflective silver outfit rather than this kind of flat gray we got for this figure here. So that's also a little disappointing. I really would have liked to have seen a chrome outfit. Same thing with the Silver Surfer figure we got a little while back. The Silver Surfer has kind of a glossy silver paint rather than a chrome paint like we got on the 90s Silver Surfer figure too. So anyway, that's Silver Sable. She's okay. And with Silver Sable, I got the final piece to complete my Build-A-Figure Kingpin. So she came with this arm here, with the fist and the ring. And this is what I'm talking about when I say Marvel Legends lately have been putting out what I would say is the near-perfect versions of some characters. Because it's hard to imagine a better Kingpin figure than this. But this is just really cool. I love the proportions of him. He's got a good weight to him. The sculpt is great, and he even came with an alternate head, so you can have him with this more stoic look, or you can have him with his yelling, angry face. I kind of prefer this one here. Yeah, it's got this great accessory here, and yeah, I love this figure. Now, my only previous Kingpin figure was, again, like Silver Sable, the Toy Biz figure from the 90s, and here he is. So yeah, you can see the improvement. So yesterday I got a call from my local EB Games, which is like GameStop here in Canada, and they told me that one of my pre-orders was in. Now, I had pre-ordered this Jaws figure along with the three main human characters from Jaws. So I pre-ordered them a while ago, and so they called me and told me that the shark was in. So I guess I still got to wait a little while for the other three guys. But yeah, so I got the shark. And I'm kind of surprised that they didn't either call this guy Jaws or maybe even use his name Bruce, which was the name given to the shark on the set of the movie. Instead, they just called him Great White Shark, which seems a little underwhelming. But anyway, there he is. And this is a pretty big figure. This is the biggest pop figure I've ever bought. Like, I have a couple of the deluxe size ones, like King Kong and Godzilla. But even their boxes were probably only about half the size of this one. So yeah, pretty big. So yeah, you can see the other three figures there that I'm expecting to get. And this shark here was available in two versions. There's this one here, and then there's one that has the tank in his mouth. And I don't know why they didn't just give you the tank loose that you could choose to put in his mouth or not, but they decided to sell two variants. And I opted for the non-tank version. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's great packaging. But let's pop this guy open and take a look at him. So here he is. But before I talk about the shark, I just want to quickly point out, I love this little background that came inside of the box. Funko has been really good about giving you these neat little specific backgrounds, which even if you decide to open your toys, this might be kind of a neat thing to hold on to just display behind him on a shelf somewhere, because it's it's pretty cool. Anyway, let's talk about the shark. So yeah, he's got those black doll-like eyes, a couple of rows of teeth, and yeah, he's pretty cool. I like him a lot. And just with these like scars on his nose and across his eye there, that's really what makes him Jaws to me. I don't think you necessarily need to have an oxygen tank in his mouth to distinguish this as Jaws as opposed to just any random shark. I can tell that's Jaws just by looking at him like that. So yeah, he's pretty cool. There's not a whole lot to say about these Funko Pops. They don't have any articulation or anything. But yeah, he looks great. I don't know if I love the way he sits, because I probably will display him outside of his box. So I wish his tail was a little more weighted, or his fins were displayed a different way so that he could be propped up like that. Or even if Funko had packaged like a little clear stand or something so that you could put underneath of him, would be preferred. But I'm sure I can find a little piece of something to stick underneath of him so I can prop him up like that. And even though I don't have the Funko Pop versions of Brody and Hooper and Quint just yet, I do have these reaction versions of them. And even they look pretty cool displayed next to this giant shark. So yeah, pretty happy about this purchase here. I'm a huge Jaws fan, so this is awesome. And when I went into EB Games to pick up my Jaws, I decided to finally grab this Siege version of Optimus Prime. It's a great looking figure, and it's been out for a couple of months now, but I have avoided picking it up just because it was $40, which is a little pricey, and I already have a bunch of different Optimus Primes, so I didn't really know if I needed this one, even though it is really nice. But ultimately I decided that yes, I do need this one, and hopefully it's the last Optimus Prime I buy for at least a good long time. But let's open them up and take a look at them. Alright, so this is Siege Optimus outside of the packaging. And as you can see, he definitely looks like Optimus Prime. He's got all the things you'd expect to see on a good Optimus Prime figure. The head sculpt is very good. He's got the kind of flat face truck front right across his chest. He's got the pipes on his arm, even though they're a little short. The colors are exactly what I want. This thing on the back here is the only thing that's a little clunky. It's not too bad though. It just kind of looks like a backpack of sorts. Yeah, and I've seen much worse as far as kibble on the back of a Transformer. So yeah, this isn't too bad. This is actually a really cool Optimus Prime, which I've looked at him many times in the store, and I thought, this is very cool, Optimus. I really should get this. Like I said, I was just dragging my heels because it wasn't that long ago I bought another really good Optimus Prime. And I try not to get into the habit of buying multiple versions of the same character when I already have a really good version of said character. But yeah, it's pretty hard to find anything to complain about here. I like the paint job. I don't necessarily love this scuffing that they've been doing in the Siege line. So they add this kind of mud or battle damage all over it. But yeah, it looks pretty good here. They didn't overdo it. And it does kind of differentiate him from some of the other Optimus Prime figures that I have and that have been released. So yeah, I like it a lot. And I think this probably will be my default Optimus for quite some time. For accessories, he comes with this cannon, which looks like the typical Optimus Prime cannon. And then he's also got this big axe, which I don't think I'll display him with. It's kind of cool. There's a lot of detail on that side. Not much detail on this side. But yeah, I don't think Optimus Prime needs a giant axe. So I'll probably just throw that in my accessories bin. So I just want to quickly mention the reason why I kind of dragged my feet about buying this Optimus Prime, even though he's really cool. And that's this thing here. Now I know that looks like a half of an Optimus Prime, and that's exactly what it is. But this Optimus Prime figure, and here's his guts. So you kind of slide this in from the back, and that would be his, his chest piece and his head. And that was a great Optimus Prime figure. And I just got it last year. It was part of the Power of the Primes series. So I thought this was going to be my default Optimus. It looked great. It was a good size. But here's the problem. So this middle piece, you could take him out and tuck that away, and there you go. So Optimus Prime turned into Orion Pax, and this is who Optimus Prime was on Cybertron before he became the leader of the Autobots and Optimus Prime. And I just really loved this Orion Pax figure. I thought it was really cool. They've done a couple of Orion Paxes in the past, but nowhere near as cool as this. This one looks like he did in the cartoons. So once I decided I was going to keep him like this on my shelf, then all of a sudden that big shell of an awesome Optimus Prime became kind of useless. So now my shelves were still lacking a really nice Optimus Prime. And now they've got one. So this guy probably could be a little bit bigger, but he's still a pretty good size, and it's a great figure. So I am glad that I finally decided to pick him up. So now I can have both of these guys displayed on my shelf. Alright, and the next new figure I got this week is the Funko Pop Hellboy from the latest Hellboy movie. So let's pop him out and take a look. Okay, so this is Hellboy. And I'll be honest, I don't love it. Like, it's fine. But it doesn't necessarily look to me like the Hellboy that was featured in the new film starring David Harbour. And I've talked about that on past videos. I actually kind of enjoyed that movie. It had plenty of problems, but I actually thought it was a lot of fun anyway, even though it was a huge bomb and really tanked. So I probably would have bought this figure anyway, but I felt extra compelled to buy it to just kind of support the movie a little bit, because I really don't think it was as bad as everybody made it out to be. But, so yeah, it's a decent pop, but I have the Hellboy pop that had come out previously. Now this one I don't think is really based on the other, like the older two movies. I think this Hellboy is more or less just based on the comic book. But I like it a lot more by comparison. Like, this one seems like oddly small for some reason. And when you see them side by side, you really notice how not red this Hellboy is. It's kind of just a weird orange. And so yeah, it's okay. But I do like the other Hellboy better. So if you're a casual Hellboy fan, I'd say pick this one up instead. And here is the last new toy I have to show you this week. So this is a Morlock figure from the 1960 movie The Time Machine, which was based on H.G. Wells' book. So yeah, I I own the DVD of the original Time Machine movie, and I love it. I think it's just kind of just great old science fiction. And if you haven't seen it, basically this guy invents a time machine, and he goes very far into the future, where the human race has kind of evolved into two different species. There's the peaceful Eloi that live on the Earth's surface, and then there's these creepy Morlocks that live underground, and they come up to feed on the Eloi. So yeah, they're pretty like stupid looking, but I love how stupid they look. Like, and this figure looks awesomely stupid. And yeah, great packaging. So I'm not going to pop this one open to show you, because I'm going to keep this one sealed in the package, because I think that's part of the appeal. I'm just going to pin this up on my wall with some of my other figures up there, make it part of the border. And yeah, this is a pretty cool figure. I was kind of surprised when I first saw it advertised. I totally expected it to be a 5-point of articulation figure, because that seems to be kind of the cool thing to do now, is to make figures that only move at the legs, the arms, and then turn the head, kind of like the old Star Wars toys. But this guy, he's actually, it says on the back there that he's got 7 points of articulation. And you can see there he moves at the wrist, the elbows, the shoulders, and I'm assuming the head, possibly the waist. So it's kind of odd that he doesn't have any leg movement whatsoever. But it is kind of cool that he does have these 4 interchangeable hands, complete with weapons and bones. And he also has like a whip. So yeah, I think this is a really great figure. Unfortunately, he was $29.99. So it's kind of hard to justify that for a figure that's this simple. But yeah, this figure was available in 2 other color variants. And this company, who I'm not really familiar with, Monstars, they put out a whole series of these. So there's the 3 Time Machine guys. And then there was also some figures from Creepshow and a couple other old science fiction movies that I'm not even familiar with. And they all looked pretty cool. I would have been happy to buy a few of them if they were, a more reasonable price, like $15. But at $30 a pop, this will probably be the only one I get. But I do think it's pretty awesome. So those are my new toys. Thank you very much for watching the video. Casey appreciates all your likes and all your comments and all your subscribing. So keep doing that. Anyway, until next time. Ciao.